think you have to be happy with it first, and then you have to think about why you're creating it, who your audience is, and ultimately you have to be happy with what you do. So the word art is really hard to define. And I think sometimes when we look at other people's art, it can inspire us, where other times maybe it can make us angry. It can make us frustrated. It can make us jealous. It can make us confused. And I try to think about your attention. What do you want to give your attention to? Things that bother you or things that make you happy? And just like television shows, if I'm watching flipping channels and all of a sudden it's something that I don't like, I'm not going to watch it all day. However, sometimes I will get trapped into a reality show and then I'm all angry, like, why does this person make money just eating food all day? I do that and it's not healthy. And so I think you have to realize, like, what do you want you to put your focus on? And if you don't have to like everything, it's probably good that you don't. And, everything's not about money. And, when you think about money and art, money is money is art. It's a tangible material, paper, coins, little sculptures that we gave an idea or a value to. And art is the same thing, right? It's a concept or an idea that's physical that we give a value to. So when you have one idea measuring another idea, and then people can make art that looks similar or the same or totally different, and one takes time and one doesn't, and one sells their pieces for $1 million and one gives it away. It's so distorting, and it can be mind boggling. So I just say, if money wasn't involved, no one else was around, what would you do? And I think you should try to focus on that. And when I'm painting in my studio late at night, or I'm not really thinking about what anybody else is doing or anything like that. So you have to find your kind of area in it, and but it's still good to see what other people are doing. So is there such a thing as good art or bad art? It just depends. I know since I was a student versus I was a teacher, my opinions have changed. And that's what's scary, is when you start to say, wait a minute, this used to bother me and now I think it's hilarious. But I think that's good, that our perspectives can change and we can become more open-minded to things. This piece here is called Artist Shit, and it's literally a can of the artist feces. And I know that's disgusting. I didn't do it. Don't judge me. But Piero Manzoni was a painter and a sculptor, and in 1961, he felt like he was being pressured to make something super personal. And so, what did he do? He was like, "You want something personal? I'm gonna poop in a can and I'm gonna sell it." And he pooped in 90 cans, and he sold all of them. And he sold them for what the weight of gold would have sold for at that time. And he sold all 90 cans, and he had the labels were in multiple languages, and he autographed each one and numbered them. And for years people didn't know, is that really what's inside of the can, until they started exploding and leaking. And now there's only about 45 left, and they're literally worth like thousands of dollars. And you may be like, why are you talking about this? Well, they're not. It's famous. They have a can in the Modern Museum of Art, and the Pompidou and the Tate. It's like big places, bought these cans of feces. It's pretty disgusting. But I remember taking an art history class, and it was an auditorium class at UT, and I was falling asleep in the back, and all of a sudden my professor projected that image and said what it was, and I jumped up and I literally fell asleep out. I fell out of my chair because I was just like, couldn't believe that someone had made that. And I was really upset at the time because I had just come from a painting class and my professor had told me that I didn't know how to use color correctly. And I just remember thinking, like, I made this super personal painting about, my life and my challenges, and and I'm told I don't use color correctly, but I'm going to learn about this guy in our history class that pooped in a can. Like, how did he use color? It's pretty weird. And but now I realize that he was making a point about product and celebrity and fame. And now in today's world, in 2020, how many people do we have put their name on products that aren't really valuable? or maybe good. And so I now look at it in a different way and see that it's about consumerism and mass marketing and celebrity fetish and things like that. And then on the right here, we have a painting by Leonardo da Vinci of the Last Supper, and these things are both famous and in history books. So art can be very distorting, and it's interesting how we covet different things. Another one to think about is, how are paintings made? Do you have to use an easel and a brush? Do they have to be made by a person? There's a lot of things to question. One day I was on eBay and I was looking up artists that sell their work on eBay, and I found a famous turtle that a woman takes her turtle every day, dips it in paint, and then puts it on a piece of watercolor paper, and the paintings sell every single day for like thousands of dollars. And I was like, I need a turtle, but I didn't get one. But it's interesting just to see, people are interested in different things, but you have to kind of find your own sort of vessel to create your work. So these are just some questions to think about, like what purpose do you want to have your art to have? What power do you want it to have? Is it part of who you are? Do you want it to affect the viewer in some way? And consider that in the class, and also realize that there are going to be other people in this class that may make very personal stuff, where other people may make more decorative stuff, and they both have every right and ability to do so. And so I want you to keep that in mind as we critique each other's work, that there may be a level of sensitivity, and some people may make things that are very deep and personal, where others may make things that are more, it's more about color and imagery and things like that. So we'll see a variety throughout the class. Some people say that painting is the most popular form of art. I think that just depends on what type of art the person makes, that is thinking about it. But it is pretty popular. We think about it as drawing with paint dating back over 30,000 years ago to people, spitting pigment in their hand with their spit and drawing on cave walls and things like that. But really what makes paint is that it's fluid. And so it is kind of like drawing, but with a liquid or fluid material. And these are the components of paint that you do need to know this. I'm not going to test you or quiz you on anything, but you will see that these terms come up as we go through different demos and lectures. But the pigment is what provides the color. The binder medium is what holds the pigment together and also attaches it to the surface that you're working on. And then the vehicle is what spreads it across the surface. And so that the binder and the vehicle is what's going to vary for each type of paint that we use. And the pigment, though, sometimes is the same. It's just the binder and vehicle that are different. And I know a lot of people think of paint as like being around forever, and it has been around for a really long time. But do you know that tube paint was not invented until like the mid to late 1800s? So it's really not that old if you think about the ability of going outside and not having to make your own paint. It's pretty modern compared to other forms of art. Some other terms that we'll talk about priming and making your canvases, what we call gessoing. And we do that because it seals the canvas. If you work with acrylic, it's not going to harm canvas, but if you work with oil, the oil paint will actually break down the canvas over time if you don't gesso it or prime. But like I said, most of the ones you get at the store, that's already been done. And with watercolor, it's a stain. And so you're wanting it to absorb into the surface. So we don't prime watercolor paper in most cases. So these are the different types of paint that are out there. And I usually ask students, like, which do you think is the best? And a lot of them will say oil. But that's not true. They're all just different. If you were going to be cooking, and you ask someone what's cheese, what are they going to say? What are you cooking with? Or what are you trying to make? It depends. And so the same thing with paint. Oil is pretty popular because it was the first type of paint that was invented that allowed people time. where before that we had tempera and encaustic and fresco, which all dried really quickly. And so I think why oil was so popular in the Renaissance and the early Renaissance is because it was the first type of paint that didn't dry right away. And so people could kind of take their time, and because they could take their time, they could blend and they could layer glazes, creating an illusion of reality that had never been able to be created before. But that doesn't mean that all these other types of paint are not equally as impressive or have their own unique characteristics that you can do with the work. And a lot of them can even be made to look like others. So it really kind of just depends on what you like to do. And as a student, I was always a student that wanted to not be a master of one thing, but to master everything, or at least try everything. So I've used literally every single one of these, and I still do, except I don't do fresco, too often. But most of the others, I use all of these. Like I have at home, there are some that you can combine together. If I'm working really large and I want to cover the background, I'm going to cover it with acrylic or spray paint, and then I'm going to put oil on top if I want to blend something. So we'll talk about some of those rules and where you can combine things and where you shouldn't. But some have to be on certain materials, and some have to be, you can't put on top of each other. So we'll go over some of those rules as we go throughout the class for sure. And then, but if you look at some of these traditional binders, it's pretty weird stuff like eggs and, how people invented these things. To me, it's fascinating. And when we talk about color on Wednesday, I'll tell you where some of the pigments and stuff came from, and you're probably going to be probably a little disgusted by some of them. And I even put spray paint on here. What's funny is I've been teaching for, I guess, almost 15 years now. When I first started teaching spray paint, they did not have artist grade spray paint. You could only get like the outdoor, like house spray paint, Krylon or whatever it is. And since I've been teaching, just in the last 15 years, now they have Montana, Liquitex, all these different brands of artist spray paint with different tips that you can buy, all kinds of really cool things. So we always are going to be having new things come about that will eventually become one of the traditional mediums that we use. Encaustic, a lot of people don't know what that is. That uses beeswax, and I do paint with encaustic. I have a setup that if we have time this semester, I'll maybe show you if I can do a demo and record it or something. But it uses melted beeswax and pigment, and it's believed to be one of the oldest types of painting processes. But what happened was when all of the cultures in ancient times, they would destroy each other and they would destroy all of the culture. And so when the Egyptians and Greeks and Romans were using encaustic for painting mummies, they would paint a portrait of a person and put it in their mummy. They were all buried underground. And so people literally forgot about encaustic paint. And during the Renaissance, whenever they wrote the first art history book, people had totally forgot about encaustic. So it wasn't written about. They only wrote about oil, tempera, and fresco. And then a couple of hundred years later, when Napoleon started excavating ancient ruins, his troops found over 800 of these encaustic paintings underground in the Fayum Desert. And they were like, what is this? And then people were like, I think it's wax paint. And they called it encaustic. And so because it wasn't in that first art history book, some of the art snobs in the world say that it's not a traditional painting medium and that it's a craft because it wasn't in that book. Now, to me, that's kind of silly, but I think people just didn't know about it. So it took a while because if you heat wax too hot, it burns. So how the Egyptians did it and so beautifully, it's really weird that they were able to control it and all of that. But it took a while in modern times before people could really figure out how to work with it. And because of artists like Arthur Dove, Jasper Johns, they brought it into the modern era where now we have electricity and hot plates that we can control the temperature to make sure the wax doesn't burn. So anyway, I could talk about this stuff forever. Y'all are probably ready to move on to actual painting and stuff. So we'll be talking about some of these different types of paint and as we go throughout the class. And I'm going to try to expose you to as many things like this as we go throughout the class as well. All right, so I'm going to stop this one, and then the next thing I was going to just show you some student work. I know you got to see some in that Padlet, and you can see more on the Instagram and Facebook accounts, but these are some works by students a few years ago when I was really documenting stuff. Well, I'm a little behind with that, but I need to catch up. But I just wanted you to see that there's not, even though I paint like abstract figures, I teach realistic drawing from observation. I want you to see that I want you to create what you want to create in this class. Even though there are assignments, there's going to be ways that you can, I want to challenge you a little bit to make, things that maybe you haven't done before, but there's also going to be opportunity for you to do what you want for some of the more open assignments. So I have students, this student I helped come up with a new way of painting like Jackson Pollock. And we created like a little, I hung a can of paint from the ceiling, and I poked a hole in the bottom, and we spun it around and let it just drip onto this. And so then she did like a whole series on celebrities and things like that. I have students that do more portraiture, some that do, more abstract and observational things. This was one semester we were face to face, and this was at Tarrant County when I worked there. But the other painting professor went on maternity leave, so I had a whole semester where I got to teach 4 painting classes, or maybe it was three painting classes, and I had each class build. The first week of class, we built an 8 by 5 foot canvas, and we had 3 in the room that we left out. And each class I had it labeled. And at the end of each class period, when they were cleaning up any paint they had left on their palette, they would go put it on these canvases. And throughout the semester, 16 weeks, I would flip it every now and then. And the rules were they just couldn't paint completely over what someone did, but they could add to it. And so by the end of the semester, we had these 3 huge, like really weird paintings, and they sold every single one of them. And I let each class to decide like what did they want for it. And one of the secretaries at the school bought it for like 4 large pizzas that they brought for the class. One they asked for like $200 that I divided, between the students. So it was kind of funny how popular they were. But it just goes to show you that you can collaborate with painting as well. The student did this one project where he did a representational painting of a flower, an abstract version, and then like a non-objective version. And we'll kind of do something similar to that in this class. I believe this was an inspired piece. The student really liked the assignment, and she ended up doing 2 pieces inspired by an artist. This was another one of those group pieces. This student had never painted before, and for the first representational assignment, she brought a picture of herself when she was a child. And she said, I've never painted before, but this is what I want to do for my first painting. And I was like, well, a portrait, that's kind of a challenging first step. But she was like, well, you're going to help me. And so we worked together, and she was so proud of it that the next semester, when I had her the first day of class for painting 2, I was calling roll, and I said her name. And she was like, I go by the goddess of art now. And she literally was telling people to call her the goddess of art. And it was kind of funny. But she was proud of her work. This student was really inspired by Mark Rothko. And whenever she came back from the museum and had written her essay, she said that when she saw his big color-filled paintings, that they reminded her of makeup compacts, and that she wanted to be a makeup artist, and that when she put her makeup on every morning, she would wash her face and look in the mirror, and she would think, what am I feeling today? And she would choose her makeup based upon her mood. And we'll talk about Mark Rothko in the class, but that's what he did with painting, is he would choose the colors based upon his emotions. And so she thought that she was wrong in her interpretation of his work. And I was like, no, I think you're Mark Rothko. Like, I think if reincarnation is real, I think that's what happened here, because she really understood his work. But this student was into like celebrity portraits, but she added like her own unique touch to them with like color and texture. So I have so many. This piece, I know it's kind of grotesque looking and you can't really tell what it is, but this was for a non-objective painting assignment, which you all will have to do one too, or painting one. And this student, his was a memory of breaking one of his grandma's garden gnomes, and he got in like really bad trouble. And so if you hearing the story now, looking at it, you probably all see like elements of a garden gnome without it actually being there. And so that's part of non-objective work, sometimes creates a feeling or an idea without using imagery. This student was an accounting major, but she made really beautiful work. And I thought that having an accountant artist is a good idea, because I wish I was better with my money. That's for sure. But anyway, I have so many that I could show you. And this was just from a few years of painting, but I wanted you to see the wide variety of things. This student, for her self-portrait, this piece was exactly the same height as her. And she used, I think she said she used 10 tubes of modeling paste and green paint. And she had this whole story about how it represented her and it was the same height as her. And it took a lot of time to do it. So there's a lot of ways to interpret some of the assignments that I'll be giving in the class. So you can see a variety of inspired pieces. This was a piece inspired by Turner, who's a famous British landscape artist. And this student tied it into the story of her ancestors that had to travel, I think, boat to like another country for because of war. And this student, he was really, really talented, and he is a professor now. So he's like the first student I think I've had that went on and kind of followed suit. I think he teaches at TCC now. And these were some of his self-portraits from painting 1 and painting 2. So anyway, really a variety of things. And I know this is a lot to take in, but I just wanted you to see I'm happy to take your vision and what you want to do and help you, apply, further thoughts and techniques to it, and even help you come up with maybe directions you haven't considered. And you'll see a variety. This one, sometimes things that you may not know, there's a story behind it. The story, you don't always have the artist there to explain it. But looking at this, you see these red balls floating and, these drips. And whenever the student got up to explain, this was her non-representational piece. She told a story that when she was a child, her mom passed away of cancer. And that this was the last memory she had of her mom, was that when her mom was really sick in the hospital, instead of looking sick and she was worried she would make her daughter sad, she would put on a clown nose to make her daughter laugh. And I was just like, oh my gosh, y'all are ripping my heart out with these stories. But this is part of what I was saying earlier is, some people, they really make emotional stuff, and other people make more decorative or pretty or happy things. So I make both. I think it's good to put yourself into your work. So I just wanted you to be aware that if you feel the desire to be more self-expressive, it's going to be really up to you what you want to do in the course. This student had had a miscarriage and had already bought a lot of the baby stuff, and she set up like a little still life that she painted. And I just thought that was a lovely tribute. So there's a lot of there's power to painting, and I think it's very cathartic and healing as well. This student, this was his self-portrait. He didn't finish it in time for the critique that we had, but he was a DJ and he was a graffiti artist, and so he set up a still life of like